I was sitting, it was a Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting at my desk at the crisis center, and Rachel, she had just joined us. It was my first day working with her, and she was sitting across from me. She was a student from McGill University, the School of Social Work, and she was going to do her internship. So she was told, just listen to everybody talking, and you can ask them questions after. So I get a call, and this woman is telling me her story. And it is really, really hard. She's experienced a lot of sadness and a lot of tragedies, really. And I could hear it in her voice, and I'm listening, and she kept saying, "There's no point. There's just no point to all this." And she was saying, and I would ask her, "Well, what can you do?" And she'd say, "There's nothing I can do." Now, there's two words. If you only hear these two words in the few minutes I've been given here, it is hopelessness and helplessness. When we can hear those words and we can see it in their body, we need to be aware of those two words, because for me, that's usually when I start digging a little bit deeper. And she was telling me that I've been diagnosed with depression, and now I'm on an antidepressant and it doesn't work and I feel worse. And so I asked her, "Are you thinking of hurting yourself or even killing yourself?" And she said, "Yeah." So I asked her, "Do you have a plan?" And she said, "Yeah." And she shared it with me, and it would have worked. So I said, "Listen, I have a different plan. I want you to let me help you. I want you, please let me help you. Let's try something else first." And so I convinced her to go to the hospital. I wanted to go pick her up and bring her to the hospital. She didn't want me to do that because people would see me. And so I said, "Just go then, and I'll meet you there." And so she was going to go and call me with the nurse, and then I would go join her and keep her company. And so I'm typing in my notes, and Rachel looks over at me and she's like, "Wow, whose model of intervention did you use?" And I said, "What?" And she said, "What model of intervention? Who did that model?" And because at McGill, they're very theoretical. And I said, "Well, actually, no, I didn't use anyone's model. You see, I was homeschooled. My mother had bipolar, and this was something that we had to deal with. And I had a friend in high school whose mother had committed suicide, and it just turned out that way, that I had a lot of different people that showed me what it can look like. Now, there's a lot of signs that we've already gone through: the sullenness, the different emotions, sleep being changed, too much sleep, too little sleep, mood cycles. There's also one that if you see someone suddenly picking up speed and they just seem to be happier and they're suddenly giving all their stuff away, that's when you really need to red flag. Okay, just put one on there. And one of the things that she had said was she had started an antidepressant. And when you start a medication like that, that's actually a higher danger, because you still feel crummy, but the medication starts working and it gives you more energy first, but you don't feel better. You feel like you have energy to do the action. So that's why I'm saying, when she said she just gotten on antidepressants, she felt hopeless, she felt helpless, I need to do this. Now, I want you to know, you don't need any special training. You may have actually already saved someone's life and didn't know it. In fact, I didn't get trained for suicide intervention until 1 month before I quit that job. They didn't have the money, they didn't have the time, so I just did what I thought. And there was this one woman I picked up from the psychiatric ward, and when they go on new medications, it's not stable at home, they would come and stay with us for a couple of weeks sometimes. And she had decided she would kill herself, but she hadn't done it. She ended up in the hospital. So I did ask her, "Well, what happened?" And she said, "Well, I had it all planned out, and I was even writing my letter, and like my letter of goodbye, because that's what you're supposed to do." And she said, and my friend called and said, "Hey, it's a beautiful day, let's go for ice cream." And I said, "Wow." And that's all it took? She says, "Yeah, I wasn't giving up on ice cream. I could put that off." And her friend asked her, "What is going on with you? How are you feeling?" And ended up taking her to the hospital. And that's why she was saved that day. So this wasn't in October. This was during the summer, and ice cream is a big deal in the summer in Montreal. So the tools of the trade to be a suicide interventionist are this: empathy, non-judgmentalness, compassion, and kindness. I, as a mental health counselor, I was asked to go to the local police station and help them understand what's going on with when you're kind of having to deal with someone who may not be well. And I simply asked them this: how do you want to be treated if this is happening to you? Now, remember, you're out of touch with reality. I was talking to them specifically about psychosis. You are feeling overwhelmed. All these juices are floating around in your brain, and now it's malfunctioning. How do you want to? How do you need to be approached? And that made all the difference in how they were going to deal with people moving forward. I could see it on their faces, like, oh, they thought like containing them and getting them to the hospital by force. But that doesn't work, because the next time they'll run when they see you. So there's a little bit of training that goes on with everybody who's involved on the front lines. Now, I've sat on the edge of a gurney with complete strangers, relatives, and friends. The beginning of this process doesn't take a degree. It just takes kindness. And I'm going to get a little personal now, because almost 4 years ago, I was involved in a car accident. And what they totally missed was the extent of the brain trauma and its effects on me. I have always suffered from anxiety from the time I was little. I'm very sensitive to feeling judged and ridiculed or even shamed. I grew up in a shame-based family. And I'd also been diagnosed with ADHD, but I was really high functioning, so it didn't feel like a big deal. But both of these took a big hit. After my accident, I was unable to work. In fact, it took almost 3 years before I can say my executive functions of my brain are finally getting aligned. Right after the accident, my husband lost his job of 19 years. And then soon after that, 6 family deaths in 6 months. One of them, my mother, and it was her decision. Another one was a suicide where he hung himself, and my relative found him, and she's not over it. So I developed a clinical depression and recognized it when nothing that I could do, all the stuff Val talked about, taking care of ourselves, couldn't stop it. And suicide ideation followed me like that big black dog. And I started thinking there was no point, that my family would be better off without me. So I spoke to my doctor, and we made a plan, and it included medication. And I know what that can do. So I let my family know, and I'm doing really well now. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but you know the semicolon, like when you write a sentence and you put a semicolon and you finish the sentence, it's like it's more than a comma, but it's not a period. So it's not the end of the sentence. Well, they use that as a symbol now. When people are dealing with suicide or substance abuse, that little semicolon gets turned into different images. So on my mom's birthday, after her death, I got a tattoo with the semicolon in my parents' honor. My dad was an alcoholic. And this is a picture of it. It's on my wrist. You can see it's a butterfly with the semicolon and the butterfly with the 2 hearts. And that is in honor of my parents, which I can see when I look down at my wristwatch. Now, I'm not going to state statistics except this one. 4 out of 5 people traditionally suffer from mental illness. And during this pandemic, this number is going up. We've been talking about that. So we need to be there for each other. And we don't replace the medical professionals. Actually, we are part of the team, because a person's outcome has more to do with who is surrounding them at home than what's going on at the clinic. So we all need to be that person for someone else, or we need to find that person for ourselves if we're having doubts. There are people there ready to help. So if someone's emotions are loud, pay attention, help them pay attention. And if they stop taking care of themselves and they seem sleep deprived or anything, just like Sejal was talking about and what Val was talking about, Or if they seem lonely, do they seem lonely? Ask them, like Patricia told us to do, or take them for ice cream. Ask them, how have you been? Really, really, I want to know. And learn how to do what Ruth is about to show us, to de-escalate, so you don't end up in this state of overwhelm. It takes a village. And this is a CAPS Foundation small contribution towards starting the dialogue towards self-empowerment and mental fitness. So now I'm going to toss over the Zoom podium to my good friend from Ottawa, Ruth Sermon.